Hi, I'm Dr. Alison Kole, sleep medicine specialist and bona fide chronic insomniac. Welcome to the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast. Remember, knowledge is empowerment, and if applied correctly, it can help you biohack your way to a better night of sleep, just like I did. Welcome to the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast. I'm excited. We're here in season 3, and I have lovely Ms. Morgan Adams. And you're, if I say licensed clinical social worker by training, is that accurate?
Sort of, kind of, not
Okay.
100%. So I have a master in social work, but I did not pursue licensure. So I'm not licensed. I am a
Got it. But you're
master
trained.
in social work. Yes.
Got it. All right. So I'm kind of partially correct, guys. Well,
Yes,
Morgan, I really became intrigued with speaking with you because you had revealed on one of your LinkedIn posts, I believe is what I saw, just feeling what I appreciate about your post was you were so vulnerable. You're like, listen, sometimes I feel like, am I doing the right thing? Is this sort of the right path? And I think we all struggle with that. And you have an amazing website, and it sounds like your true passion is really helping perimenopausal women sleep better. That's what I glean from kind of researching you. Can you tell us more about where your passions lie? What made you post that post? Like, I'm so curious about, what's going on in your life, and it's just very exciting to meet you. So, welcome.
Thank you. Well, I think maybe the post you're referencing is, there've been quite a few posts, but maybe I think the one you're thinking about is the one where I'm talking about somebody out in public meeting me and saying, "Oh, I follow you on LinkedIn. I have insomnia and I love your tips." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Because sometimes, and you can appreciate this as a content creator too, I'm sure, you do your content and there's not actual, response back to it. And you're kind of like, is anyone listening? Is anyone paying attention? Am I helping anyone? And so it was just that moment of feeling like, okay, I'm helping this person, even though I'm not getting the direct real-time feedback. My work is helping people on a pretty profound level. So I think that's, yeah. And what else should we talk about other than that little post?
So I am really curious to hear what your, what your experience has been in helping perimenopausal women. What are some of the hot button issues that you think really interfere with women who are going through perimenopause and menopause in their ability to sleep? Because it is, it's estimated to be approximately 50% of women are going to really struggle with their sleep. And sleep just kind of gets more crappy as we age, regardless of gender. So, what have you seen in your practice?
Sure. Well, I must preface this by saying I'm in perimenopause myself. So I'm actually starting to experience a lot of the things my clients are experiencing. So there's a laundry list of them. And so one of them, I think, is alcohol use. A lot of times women, have their glass of wine at night for decompression, with their partner.
Oh, girl, I've been guilty of that. Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it. But the problem, what I'm seeing, and I saw this for myself too, is that, as we get older, our bodies just can't process the alcohol as efficiently. And that glass of wine or two that we would have at night, all of a sudden really starts to impact our sleep and our readiness. So that's something that I see quite often. And, typically women are, if they've paid me as their coach, they typically are somewhat compliant with reducing their alcohol. And, if you have a sleep diary like that, they can see literally, like, cause I'll have a sleep diary. I'm looking at it in real time with them and they'll have to log their alcohol, and there's a clear, point that out to them. They're like, oh, okay. I'm like, you don't have to cut out alcohol altogether, but, what if you had like one glass of wine at 5 instead of like 2 glasses of wine at 8 o'clock? Let's experiment with that and see if that impacts your ability to sleep a little bit better. So it's the small changes.
I think that is such a great point, because any of us who have been guilty, especially me during COVID, it was like, I felt like sometimes I couldn't even interact. I was just like so stressed out from my 12-hour shift and seeing death all the time and stuff. I was like, oh my God, I need to take my brain away from this immediately. And you don't, it can be subtle because you don't really recognize it. And then speaking to so many of my friends when we've had reunions from residency, so we're all in the same age, and we're in our 40s now, and it's amazing to hear, regardless of gender. I've had quite a number of male friends even say, like, if I have a glass of, like, we used to love having wine and we'd hang out and what have you. It was like very common for us that was our stress reducer, to have like little reunions together. And we're all like, oh man, our sleep is going to be so crappy. And it's just hysterical to see us talking about this. But in reality, it really is one of those things where I think it tells you something when you're like, if I really feel that I need to reach for that glass of wine pretty regularly. For me, that was one of the markers of it's time to make a change. Because, and what is it? It could be a change just to not have that glass of wine, or, exercise or find a different outlet for that stress. For me, I decided, I need to cut back on the wine. But not only that, I'm like, I'm not so sure I want to continue on this trajectory with where I'm going with my career. Like, so that was a career pivot moment for me, because I was like, I want to take care of myself. So part of it's just, acknowledging that, hey, maybe this has been my crutch for relaxation. Are there other things you can do?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and there are so many things we can do other than using alcohol as a crutch. I mean, stress reduction, exercise. I mean, and if you feel like you're missing out on that ritual of having a drink in your hand, there are all these mocktails out in the market right now. All these really
They have
cool.
nootropics, with the mushrooms and stuff. That stuff can really help. A lot of
Yeah,
people like it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a great alternative, and they're just the market is exploding. I feel like every time I look at Instagram, there's a new ad for, some kind of mocktail mixer.
And guess what? Now that we're talking about it, we're going to have like 20 new ads hitting us
Totally.
right now.
It's coming. It's coming soon, right?
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. All right. Well, I interrupted you to put in a little interlude, but let's continue.
Yeah.
Please tell me more. I want to know
Yeah.
about what your patients are experiencing.
So another frequent issue that I see is wake ups due to blood sugar imbalances. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of times women are doing the intermittent fasting thing, and what ends up happening sometimes is at night they will wake up because their blood sugar has dipped because they haven't potentially eaten in quite a few hours. And then that causes a cortisol and adrenaline spike, which wakes them up. So sometimes what we'll do, if we notice that happening as an experiment, we'll have them have like a small snack, like an hour before bed, with a protein, some fat and some complex carbs. And sometimes that will actually prevent the wake up. Not always, but it's a good test to see if it will work. And if they are having blood sugar imbalances, sometimes I'll recommend that they use a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, and maybe even look at that overnight to see what's going on at night. So that can be potentially a pretty big issue. It looked like you were about to say something on that note.
Well, you raised an interesting point. So I was going to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One would be, do you have them just do a regular, like, when they wake up, do a finger stick at that time? I'm just curious about how you come to that determination, or do they invest in the continuous glucose monitor because that's a suspicion?
Yeah, I think the continuous glucose monitor is a lot more appealing of an option for people. Rather than sticking your finger every day.
Especially in the middle of the night, like, hey,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah, and sometimes they can just and some of my clients also are wanting to lose weight, so it kind of fills a dual purpose, because when you're using the continuous glucose monitor and you sign up with a company, I use NutriSense, but there's other ones out there, but often you can have like a coach attached to the app who works for the app, giving you like real-time feed. They can give some really great guidance on that. I have some, guidance I can give myself, but I'm not a trained dietitian. So my limits, I've got some limits in that capacity. But sometimes what happens is once they get their blood sugar balanced, they not only sleep better, but they start to lose weight because they're eliminating some of those foods that are creating all of those spikes. So Yeah,
Wow.
it's definitely a common issue, and as women, age, we become less insulin sensitive, so we may be experiencing a lot of that imbalance, and looking into it more closely with CGM can give us a lot of clues.
And I just wanted to make another comment about what you're saying, which I think may tie in with another episode that I did with Val Cacho. We talked about some quote functional foods for sleep because they really are in the higher fiber category. But then you can also think about things that have some fat. So almonds can be quite good. Some people, if you don't mind a little tart cherry juice, that shouldn't spike you too much, but that might help you sleep. High fiber foods. People have even talked about kiwis. So maybe something with some fruit and some almonds. Do you have any specific recommendations on, foods that you really think are very effective in your
Well,
opinion?
a couple of good ones are like Greek yogurt with some almonds, like a half a banana with some almond butter or a nut butter are good. Even also leftovers from dinner. Because like if you've had, some meat or something and some potato and some veg, you can just put like a tiny little bit of that on a plate. We're not talking about having an extra dinner at night. That's just too much food. But just having a little something, I think a lot of times, when people get those cravings at night to eat with a cookie jar, they'll get some ice
Mm-hmm.
cream, and those foods just perpetuate bad sleep. So interesting you mentioned the high fiber. So they did a study on postmenopausal women, and they found that a high glycemic diet was associated with a higher rate of insomnia. So essentially, if you're eating foods that are sugary, highly processed, low fiber with your sleep. So if we can kind of think about high fiber, healthy fat, healthy protein, complex carbs, Mediterranean diets actually have been shown to have some correlation with good sleep. So that, Mediterranean food is really tasty.
Oh,
I'm a
yes, it
huge
is.
fan of that. I'm into that pretty regularly myself.
And I love how you really do incorporate looking at these different aspects, including, what your diet is, into your recommendations and working, really thinking about what might be interfering with folks' sleep. This is really cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you. And another thing that I'll mention, it's kind of like the one of the bigger offenders that I'm finding as far as like wake ups, which tend to be the biggest complaint among my women. It's there's the falling asleep, there's a staying asleep, there's a waking up early, but the waking up in the middle of the night is the most common complaint. So one of the things that I think is a culprit for that wake up often is when people are too hot. And I'm not
Hot
necessarily, I
flashes.
mean, hot flashes and night sweats are definitely things that disturb sleep. Absolutely. But quite often people are just too hot, and it has nothing to do with a hot flash coming or a night sweat, but they are just too hot. So there's some solutions to that, but really I think what has like helped me personally, I don't have hot flashes or night sweats, but I'm in the phase of life where I'm sleeping hotter, and the cooling mattress pads are like a total game changer. And yeah, they are a bit of an investment financially, but they are very, very good with keeping your body temperature cooler.
I actually had a friend reach out to me about a brand. Do you have any brands? And this is not sponsoring. This is just what your opinion is.
Yeah.
Do you have any ones that you think have been effective or that you've heard have been good, either for yourself or through clients?
Well, full disclosure, I am affiliated with this company, so I'll just share that. But
Okay.
it's called Eight Sleep, and they have really, really advanced technology. So they have something called autopilot, which kind of helps the temperature get adjusted without you having to manually do it. And they also have a sleep tracker attached to it. So if you want, the reason it's probably the most expensive one in the market is because of the technology also associated with the sleep tracker. So it's almost like having two in one. So for people who don't want a sleep tracker, that's probably not the best bet because you're paying for that, right? So
Yeah, I have a question for you about that. That's specifically Lega. This one's for you. He he had asked me about this, and I was curious, can you set it to a specific time when it cools down, because around that time you feel like you're waking up?
Yeah.
Can you like sort of set it that way?
You can set it at not at a specific time, but they kind of break your night up into like 4 different segments. So you could have it cooler during that segment of the night that you feel like you're more likely to wake up. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
well, that's so funny, because it was exactly that company. Oh my goodness. I'm gonna text him after we're done with this. I'm gonna be like, by the way,
and this is like the most like luxurious feature on it is you can obviously set it to your preference, but I set it for a wake up alarm to get very hot. So you can set it to get hotter or vibrate. Now I don't do the vibration part, but just the actual heat itself is my alarm clock. And it feels really nice to be like in a really cozy warm bed in the morning. Sometimes I don't want to get out.
And now a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Struggling with sleep? Dr. Kole is here to help. Whether you need a comprehensive sleeping coach program, suspect you have sleep apnea, or simply seek a second opinion, she's available for consultations in New Jersey, New York, California, and Georgia, with more states coming soon. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today to find out which visit is right for you at AskTheSleepMD.com and start your journey to better sleep with a trusted physician.
If you are liking this podcast, if you're finding it educational, if you are feeling more empowered to go to your doctor with any sleep issues that you might be having to address them, please, please, please lend your support. Make sure that you are liking, following, subscribing. I am available on YouTube. I'm also on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. The website has launched. So we have AskTheSleepMD.com to be your free educational resource. We've added many new blog posts filled with juicy information. If you would like to support the podcast, we now have a way for you to donate. This is a labor of love. I truly enjoy what I am doing. It would be inspiring and truly helpful if you wouldn't mind even so much as donating $1 to keep this podcast going, particularly if you really find this free education a good platform for you and a good resource for you. I also have affiliate links for products that I'm a proponent of, such as Quiet Mind. So please check out the website. Sign up and you will get the latest news, the latest blogs, some sleep tips, and just have a great day and keep listening. Okay, guys, sleep well. So I have another question for you. So, I'm married, you're married. Does your husband perceive, like, does he have his side that's regulated? Like, do they make it so that each side can be a little different?
Yes, each person can regulate their own temperature, which is wonderful because I work with so many couples who are having little disagreements about the temperature because one's too hot and one's too cold. And with this, you have like, everyone's happy. What is that saying? If mama's not happy, nobody's happy, right? Happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife, happy life.
There we have it.
Oh, yeah.
There we have it. You got it, right? Yeah. So it's kind of a crowd pleaser in that regard.
That is so cool. Anything else?
Let's see. What else are a big one here that I feel like should be shared as a PSA, if anything. Sleep apnea is something that you're giving me the thumbs up. You're like, yes. So this is interesting because what I find quite often with women in midlife is that along the journey of the sleep coaching experience, I will suspect that, okay, because some of the interventions, they might not work, right? We're trying all these things.
Right.
And there gets to be a point where I'm like, okay, we need to look at your breathing. We need to have this investigated. And there have been several clients who have been like, me? I'm not overweight. I don't snore, and what I explain to them is, look, sleep apnea rates in midlife for women basically start matching those of men in their same age cohort. And 90% of women with sleep apnea go undiagnosed. We also aren't snoring maybe as much as men. Our breathing irregularities are a little bit more subtle. And also like if they say, "Oh, my husband never says anything about my breathing or snoring," well, your husband's asleep. Unless you're really, really like snoring
Yes.
to shake the roof, they might not know to like ping you about it. So then we get into the area of, helping them find somebody either like locally to do a sleep study, or, I sometimes use something called Wesper Health. Have you heard of this company? So
I have heard of Westbrook.
yeah,
Yes. I've tried their equipment.
yeah, they sent me some actually almost 2 years ago. I discovered myself, I have upper airway resistance syndrome, mild, or very mild apnea. And so because it's so easy to use, I feel like sometimes that's more palatable for people than the sleep study, because they feel like they can be at home. But if there are any irregularities detected by the app, then there's somebody on the other side, a sleep doctor, who can kind of take the reins from there and get a full evaluation, because the Wesper or similar types of home testing kits don't give the definitive diagnosis, really. So
Yes. So, Morgan, you brought up like 1,000 amazing points about sleep apnea. So, ladies, Morgan is 100% correct. Men are always about roughly ish, maybe a quarter of men will have sleep apnea. That risk for women, it goes from like 9% up to the same amount, roughly, if you look at statistics. And we are understudied in sleep studies. It's becoming more common for us to be included, but for the longest time it was like, oh yeah, women go through all that stuff, whatever, but this is the presentation for sleep apnea. And we discover women we're really outside of it. One of the harbinger symptoms is insomnia, especially being able to maintain your sleep, which is exactly what you're saying. People are waking up frequently. And it really has to do with our hormonal changes. I mean, I think getting older, I try to look at it as being a positive, like I'm more wise. I kind of know what I want in life. And I feel more confident about who I am. But there's also some freaking real big downsides. And only we as women go through them, right?
yeah,
So don't hesitate, because that was one of my first lessons, was trying to be very evidence-based and everything we know. And, I really decided that a patient probably didn't have sleep apnea based on all the parameters, their airway, what it looked like, etc. But they were in the perimenopausal phase. And I was like, well, I'm not quite sure. They really were reticent. I didn't convince them to do the sleep study. I'm not kidding. You went through their dentist and had a sleep study, and boom, they had some mild sleep apnea. And I was like, I wanted to kick myself. And ever since then, always universally, I'm like, just do this. And it may not be perfect, right? But part of it's like, what's your pretest probability? And you are pointing out something else, which is that home sleep apnea testing, there are some limitations. So it can be really good. It often correlates 85-90% with in-lab testing. That high probability patient that has more of the obvious symptoms, heck yeah, you're going to diagnose them. Most probably using a home sleep test.
Yeah.
However, there's going to be 10% that you're going to miss. And that, depending this type of device you use, that may actually be a bigger margin, especially for your more mild patients. But it doesn't hurt to at least go through that sort of screening process. And it doesn't mean it's going to be like, oh, great, now I can be in a machine. And I have a lot of ladies that don't like, the wrinkles and stuff. Sometimes it's just the most appropriate therapy. But sometimes things like, oral appliances, and you work with a dentist to get something, they can be very effective. And it's not this big, huge, thing that you have to, or a mask or anything that you have to wear. So it could be something very small, but it's important because it also affects our risk for cardiovascular disease, which we know women tend, as we're, into menopause, we present worse. With worse disease, and we tend to ignore it basically until it's really critical, like we've reached a critical mass, because we're so used to being like, no, I'll take care of that later. I've got other things to do. So it's just, I think you're highlighting a good point, which is, if you're going to go so far as to really work on improving your sleep, go the extra mile if it's suggested.
Yeah.
It's not going to harm you to do so.
Right.
It's actually probably going to be really good for you and really good for your heart health long term, especially. Not to mention, our ability to think better and all the other things that happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, one last thing on that is I really feel like women need to advocate for themselves when they are presenting their situation to a doctor. I have an acquaintance who I've been messaging back and forth with on Facebook, and I suggested that she contact her doctor to get a sleep study. And when I followed up with her, she's like, well, they denied a sleep study based on some pre-screening questions. And I didn't know exactly which questions they asked her, but I supposed, and you can weigh in on this, you're more of your area of expertise, but my guess is that they may have given her like the stop bang questionnaire.
Which is not great for ladies.
Exactly. And then,
oh my goodness.
And then because she didn't screen appropriately didn't have enough points, for that assessment, they said, oh, you don't have sleep apnea. But like the stop bang, just for people who are unfamiliar, it's like, what is it, 6 questions, or it's less than 10 questions.
Yeah, it's kind of based on, your gender, your age, and then they ask you a series like, do you snore? Are you feeling tired? Do you have high blood pressure? So there's a whole series, what's your neck size? There's like a whole series of questions. I honestly I'm going to cheat and Google it because I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's like 6 or 8 questions, something like that.
It's a very quick and dirty, I call, screening quiz, and it hasn't been validated for midlife women. So that's a whole lot of population that it has not been validated for. So I find it really kind of offensive that, this woman actually was denied screening based on the fact that she didn't qualify per that assessment. Because she may quite, she might have some of the issues, but she doesn't have the snoring. She doesn't have the 17-inch neck or whatnot. But I even heard somebody in sleep medicine say on a podcast that they felt, or on Instagram, that they felt like all women in midlife should be screened just as we would be screening blood pressure. It like a vital sign, essentially.
Yes. Sleep is a vital sign. Whoever said that, amen, because I've definitely been preaching that. Yes. Just as a fact check real quick, because you got to love Google.
Yeah. Easy.
There are 4 questions, and then we have your body mass index, age, neck circumference, and then your gender. So just so you guys are aware, but those are it. You're right. It's like, and I see this actually, Asian patients as well may not present exactly like you don't have to be obese. That's a big thing that people think, okay, well, you're thin, it must not be a problem. But you're highlighting some really, really key features of the limitations of certain things. But sometimes it's all in the documentation, and that's why it's helpful to see someone like myself as a sleep specialist who really treats a lot of sleep apnea. More because as well, if we're trying to use your insurance to get your testing reimbursed, or if we're suspicious that something's going on with your sleep and we need to get you in the sleep lab, sometimes having someone who does this regularly and is asking those sort of deeper level questions, sometimes it can be frequent urination, and people don't even think about that. That's another thing that happens a lot with ladies as we get older. It can be very subtle signs, but if you put them all together, you can at least have the documentation that you need to make that argument.
Right.
And I am hoping, I just read on LinkedIn, I think her name is Nisha Mehta. She mentioned that she's been part of a group of folks that have been working really hard to reform prior authorization, and New Jersey apparently signed this. And I was like, amen. It is the most frustrating thing from my perspective, And also, guys, there's only so many sleep physicians to go around. However, that being said, there are folks like myself who do direct specialty care, and we work with you, So if you have a scenario where you have a physician and they maybe not be local in your state, or you live in a state where they're very few and far between, because some states have few people and, a big landscape to cover, consider something like that model, because we send you equipment, which is what I do for patients. We analyze that equipment. We are reviewing your data. We're going over those results with you. So it's really a way to have a nice comprehensive, sleep evaluation. We exist. We're out there, so take advantage of that. Even if it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to submit it to insurance or what have you, it's sort of worth it because you don't have to wait, and it's like delivered to your door,
Yes.
So there are programs like that available. So thank you for highlighting that, Morgan.
Sure.
So we are about to wrap up. So I wanted to ask you if you have any final like recommendations. What like, I mean, we could talk for a long time. This has been so exciting, but I wanted to know if you have already highlighted some really great observations and action steps. Do you have any final words, suggestions, anything else you want folks to really know about what to look for? And obviously where they can find you.
Yeah, well, I think I covered the main ones. But, I really feel like when I look at the success rate of my clients and like who's doing the best, the people that are doing the best are doing a few things. And these aren't going to surprise you. This is like basic stuff, but I feel like it's worth highlighting because I'm seeing the direct evidence. So it's waking up at the same time every morning, even on the weekends. Yeah.
You're like, girlfriend. Yes.
It's getting the natural daylight exposure as soon as you can when you're waking up. To entrain that circadian rhythm. And then exercise and movement has been so key. So they've done like, I think a meta-analysis of like 13 different studies showing that exercise regularly helps deep sleep, which we start to kind of lose a little bit in midlife. So really, I feel like that trifecta has been like the most potent in getting my midlife clients better sleep. I mean, there are many other interventions, but those to me are like the most powerful, and they're also cheap, free.
Yes.
And they help your whole entire health, not just your sleep. It's a comprehensive.
Oh, I love that.
So, I would say definitely. And again, those are not specific to midlife women, but they are definitely helping the women who I've been working with for sure.
And I'm going to add one thing is actually from your website that I thought was so great, which is you really do emphasize the ability to sort of accept some imperfections, which I think kind of ties into the concept of mindset and how you approach sleep. And it doesn't have to be perfect every night. And you don't have to have a perfectly relaxed, meditative mind. It's sort of just accepting that, life ebbs and flows. And sometimes we're going to have a monkey brain about things that we worry about. And if we find that we're over worrying, maybe that's a signal that we need to look into why it is that we're struggling so much on these sort of limited experiences, is how I would put them, as opposed to kind of taking a step back and going, wait a minute, let me kind of let go of some of this worry because stuff, think about what's good, what's happening that's good, things that kind of reduce your anxiety as opposed to focusing on like, I'm worried about this person and that situation and everything, because all this stuff, this too shall pass.
Yes.
And believe me, I had kind of a monkey brain last night, so I get it.
Yeah, our minds can be our worst enemies, especially at 3 a.m. Our minds are, I did a post the other day on LinkedIn that said your brain is a jerk at 3 a.m. and people were like, yes, it really is.
Oh my God, that's perfect analogy. Oh my goodness. Yes. It has been, I still have times when that happens, but it used to be very regular when I was on call and would like get paged and everything. And I would always be like, I know that I can just try to, go back to sleep after this. But then it would be like immediately, okay, do I need to go in, look at Epic, go look at stuff, what's happening with the patients. And then I'd be like, okay, great. Now I've had bright light in my eyeballs and now I'm really not going to sleep, and I'm so grateful that I don't have to do that.
Yes.
To be honest with you. But when you do have those situations, not picking up the electronics, you also highlight that, I think in one of your blogs, which is so great. Don't pick up the electronics in the middle of the night because you can't fall asleep. Try to do something else if you can. And there are some cool stuff. I personally just love to listen to like meditations and things. Other people maybe music. Sometimes it's an old episode of something that you've heard over and over again, a book on tape. There's all sorts of sort of creative things that you can do that don't entail you like being tethered to a screen.
Yes.
So this has been so fun, Morgan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
really, really cool. I really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
it was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you so much.
Disclaimer. The statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the U.S. Food or Drug Administration. They are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. The information provided by this podcast should not be used as individual medical advice. While I am a practicing sleep provider, I am not your sleep provider. You should always consult with your personal healthcare provider for individual recommendations and treatment.